A locked door is such a negative image, isn't it? Being enclosed, our freedom to move outside being taken away. And we may have felt like that for these last 3 months. But now our Prime Minister has released us. Well, partially at least. So we can pick up our keys, put on our shoes, get in the car and go. Wearing masks, of course. Is that how you felt that last week? If you don't feel like that, why is it? Surely you don't just stick indoors all the time with your increasingly long hair and that embarrassing stash of toilet rolls. It's time to get out and go. Well, surprise, surprise, not everyone feels like that. Some of us are hesitant to put ourselves outside those 4 walls that have held us in a sort of safety for some time. In fact, for longer than we would ever have imagined. And I'm reminded of 2 stories, 2 accounts from the Bible. The first concerns 2 men in prison. There was Paul, that famous missionary, and his colleague Silas. They were imprisoned unjustly after being beaten very cruelly. And the next morning, realizing the unlawful treatment that had happened, the magistrates hastily sent word to the police that the 2 men were to be released. On being told that, Paul said, "No," and he refused to move. He said, "We've been treated cruelly and unjustly, and I'm staying here until the magistrate comes in person to apologise to me." Sometimes there's a good reason for staying in the place of confinement until the release is above board and official and public and done with dignity and respect. Paul was prepared to suffer for the master he served, but he was also prepared to stand up for justice. Justice is a jewel that is much to be prized and then much treasured afterwards. Some people are prepared to risk the loss of their freedom for it. The second incident is more dramatic still. It's recorded that Jesus lost a very dear friend to illness. When he arrived at the man's tomb, he wept with personal grief. The man had been buried some days before. And then inexplicably, Jesus calls for the tomb to be opened up. Then follow 2 things that Jesus shouted out quite loudly so that everybody could hear around him, but more significantly, that could be heard inside the tomb. First of all, he called his friend by name. And then he says to him, "Come out." This is the point at which I often want to smile and say to myself, what else is he going to do? Where else is he going to go? But it would appear that Jesus' friend needed to be called back out from the place of death to rejoin the living. And when he appears, his neighbours are asked to cut him out of the shroud and release him back into their community. 2 stories of being called out from a place of lockdown. I think lots of people are feeling hesitant about regaining the freedom that we all are used to. The threat that locked us away hasn't been eliminated completely, and we're still required to be careful. But our God is the God of life, life in all its fullness, and that's what he wants for us. So though we may be hesitant and a bit nervous of being in a park or a pub or a plane, we must at some stage return to the real world of people and place. And then together our communities will recover and hopefully thrive again. But if our time of enclosure has taught us anything, then we must act on it. If injustice has been a recurring theme in our world these few weeks, then we need to support those looking for justice so they too can walk out of confinement with dignity and confidence in God.